Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tim and Jim Show. I'm Tim Sohn with Sohn Social Media Solutions here in Northeast Pennsylvania, like I like to say, with the bears and the turkeys. And we're excited today to have our guest, but I'm going to turn it over to my amazing friend and trusty co-host, Mr. Jim. How are you today?
I'm great, and I'm so excited for us to get Brie Anderson of Beast Analytics to join us. And I love this description that I think she says of herself, an analytical nerd with a soft spot for strategy. And I can tell you from the time that we got to spend at Social Media Marketing World with her, that's definitely true. She's just got a passion for, but she's just got, I think, a passion for life, I would have to say. And so, Brie, really excited to have you join us. Did I miss anything you might want to add about yourself?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. I think that's the best way. I mean, the only other thing I have to figure out how to get in there is that I'm always learning. Like, I love to learn. But other than that, I think it just does a really good job of describing me as a person. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. It was great to meet you guys at Social Media Marketing World. So I'm excited to see what kind of trouble we can get into.
Awesome. So Tim, you want to start out with our first question for our Brie today?
Absolutely. So Brie, why is it important for a business to have a website anyway? Do we really need to have one?
See, I've actually gotten that question a lot more recently, especially because so much of what we are used to going to at this point, it's all done through social media, right? And so people are like, well, I have a Facebook page or I have a Twitter or what have you. But here's the thing. You don't own Facebook. You don't own your Facebook page. You don't own Twitter. You don't own these spaces, right? So your website is the one place that you actually truly own, right, on the internet. So just from like a strategic standpoint, SEO aside, you have to have a website because it's yours and you have control over it, right? You don't have to worry about algorithm updates because you control the website. Aside from that, though, your website is kind of like, it's kind of like it's your home, right? And so you want in there, you can build a lot more authority and all these things that we're going to talk about here in a little bit about SEO. That website is really important to one, show Google that you're legit, right? Like you're a legitimate business. Right. And that, you're putting resources into your business and things of that nature. But yeah, I know a lot of people just want to rely on like third parties now, but we can't do that because, I know this is a long outdated example, but like, I think of MySpace. That's how I got started in the industry, was working with musicians. Wow. And when MySpace died, they all were struggling because they no longer had a place to share their music and contact their fans and all of that. And Facebook didn't have the right capabilities at that time. And so I've seen it happen firsthand to a lot of friends, and you can't trust it.
Right.
That's true. And it's
no, go
sorry,
ahead,
Jim, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, it's kind of like TikTok, with rumors about will TikTok be taken away in the United States. I know it's, I don't believe it's available in India now, along with other Chinese apps. It's the same kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that whole aspect, right? It's kind of like, and I know Brie and I had talked about this briefly, and it's funny because it's come up several times, it's like you're on rented land when you're on these platforms.
Yeah.
Right. And I know a couple people, right? They either get temporarily banned from, let's say, Facebook or Twitter, or permanently. And, part of it is because of things they did, right? Like they didn't want to start a business page and they're trying to run a business on their personal profile. And those are against the rules, right? It's their rules. But if you want to have a website, you can do whatever you want on it. And
make your own rules.
Yeah, make your own rules. And I think that it is, right? I mean, I never, my daughters were on MySpace, but I never did MySpace. But it is, right? It's like all these people that built up all this stuff, and that, who's to say that won't happen to some of these other platforms? Or people are tired of Facebook because of a lot of the noise, right? And so are they really looking at your content there?
Yeah.
And even just the basics of having an email list and Yeah. So yeah,
That's a big one too. That is a big one. I mean, again, this isn't really search related, but if you have emails, like you own that, right? Like people have given that to you. That's something that you own, where you can't, I mean, a lot of, Facebook chat is huge, Messenger is huge. But what happens if it goes down and you were about to do a huge launch, an exclusive launch, right? And these things, like, they happen. So, as many variables in this crazy digital world that we can control, we need to be controlling them and holding them close.
Right. And I think, what do you think what scares these businesses maybe from having a website? Do you think it's the cost? Do they let that get in the way? I mean, you can just about do anything on a website, right, Brie? Or
Right.
you could help them do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So my thing is, I'm guilty of this as well. I think there is, so you kind of see like two sides of the coin. Like you're saying, a lot of people get really like taken aback by the cost. Like it can be very expensive to get a really like well done, optimized website that's optimized for mobile and just for search engines in general, and all those things. It can be expensive to hire someone to do that. And there are definitely instances where that's important. However, I know a lot of my small business people are afraid of that cost. They don't know. And then they also get shamed. This is something we have a really bad time of doing this in the industry. And again, like I said, I'm guilty of it too, so I can't say it. But they get shamed if they try and use something like a Wix or a Squarespace or something like that, where it's very what you see is what you get. But here's the thing. Having a website on one of those platforms is better than not having a website at all. And quite frankly, like when my website runs on WordPress, and there are a lot of times that I get into the back end of my website and I'm like, I should have just done Squarespace, because I'm more likely to publish content in Squarespace because it's a lot easier. And with WordPress, it's such a hassle that I just don't do it. And then, like I'm missing out on that. So there are a lot of things you have to consider when you're creating a website, but I really do think it's either they can't do it, they don't know how to do it, and they don't want to be shamed for doing it the way that they could do it, or then they get worried about the cost. And if we start to talk about the cost, like I said, for some of those smaller people, it might not make sense. But a website is truly an investment that can give you return for years on end. And especially once we start talking about search engine optimization, there are some things that you can do with search engine optimization, a lot of that prove value, that you can actually see the value from. Again, when we start talking about that analytics, that's where I like to play. And just see, like, you can directly see, like, this person came from search to your website to make a conversion. And since we can track all of that now, you know what I mean? It's a lot easier to prove those kinds of, that kind of value.
Right. Awesome. So let's move into the next question and get more into this. So what are some SEO strategies that don't take much time, but if left undone, can leave your business very vulnerable?
So this is a big one. Anybody watching this, get a pen and paper right now. And we're going to write down Google My Business. That's the number one thing, is your Google My Business listing. Because that's, okay, so if people are going to do a search, where are they going to go? Google. 90% of the time they're going to Google, right? Google accounts for 90 to 93% of all searches that happen on the internet. Their enterprises do, right? Like all of their little things, which we'll talk about too. And they pull all of their business information from Google My Business. It's a free directory. It's a free business directory that you have access to as a business owner. And here's the thing, if you use your Google My Business, that actually takes up a lot more space on the search engine results. So they, that's just less chance that your competitor can show up. Also, when you are using, that's a good one. Yeah, I guess you can use your keyboard if you need to. That's funny. But if you don't have your Google My Business listing, then you can't show up in like a lot of the local search results and things like that. And so much of search is going local, that even without the explicit intent, is what we like to call it, like people saying, barbershop in Wichita or barbershop in El Paso. People just put barbershop and Google knows, like, okay, they're not going to drive 6 hours away to get their hair cut. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so to show up for those local results, you have to have a Google My Business page. And Google My Business, they make it's so intuitive. They tell you, put a picture here, write your description here. What's the category of your, you know what I mean? Like, you can go through it. It's super easy. And I highly suggest, like, that is the number one thing, especially if you're brick and mortar. That is a huge deal, to make sure that you have that Google My Business listing and that it's optimized and fully filled out.
Wow.
That's just one strategy.
That's just one. And what's another one?
Another good one is just to make sure that you have levels in your content. And the reason I say that is because I kind of like to tell people that search engine optimization is about three things. It's about big, bold, and bulleted. And really, that doesn't really mean much. But it's just a good way for people to understand that you have to have your content in a structure that people can read and find what they need to quickly, and so can Google. So, use headings, and don't just use like a format that makes it look like a header. Like, actually make sure you're using heading classes. You do that in the code. If you use like a Squarespace or a Wix, they have, when you highlight it and make it a certain heading that is going into the code in the back end, you just don't have to see it or mess with it. But what that does is it allows Google to understand what exactly that next little box of content is about. And so I want you to think about like the search engine result pages when you start to ask questions, right? So if you ask Google, if you search, like, I do this all the time, what temperature does pork need to be for it to be considered done? A lot of times you'll see like a short like paragraph, right? And so they are pulling the headings and they're going, okay, so this question was the heading. This text must be the answer, right? So I really, really stress content structures with my clients. That's a big one as well. And it's super easy.
Right. Here's a question too from one of our folks over on LinkedIn. It says, do you even have to ensure that your listing is spelled the same way and the format of the address is consistent across all channels?
This sounds like someone that's spoken to an SEO before. Yeah, so Google is constantly running around trying to make sure that your business is legitimate. And I know we have a question coming up where I can like really dive into that, but right now, Google is always trying to make sure that your business is legitimate. And one of their big things is they want to make sure that all of your NAP information, so NAP stands for name, address, and phone number, is consistent across all channels, right? So where you see this kind of come in is people say, well, if you put North Coolidge Street in one place or North Coolidge ST in another place, Google could get confused, right? So you do want to make sure that all of those naming conventions are the same across all of your channels. We call that citations. So anywhere that you put your address or phone number, so we automatically think of like our Google My Business, our Facebook page, etc. But they also live on places like Yelp and Yellow Pages or your Chamber of Commerce. All of those other little business directories that you're involved in. You do want to make sure that your name especially is the exact same everywhere, but that your address and phone number are the same as well. That's a really good question.
Yeah. And then we've got another question from George, and I've got a little bit of this issue as well. So doesn't have a physical location. He runs a mobile photography business, so he doesn't come up in maps. His area is highlighted around all of New York City and Long Island. What do you suggest he does? And should he put his home address in there? He really doesn't want people coming up to his house.
Right. And I mean, I don't blame you, George. I wouldn't want that either. Yeah. So this has been a strong people in the services industry. We do have, especially as more things go remote or mobile, you know what I mean? We've had a lot of struggles with this, or especially over the last couple of years as it's gotten more popular. And what I do suggest is having your Google My Business, and it sounds like you already do and you have that service area highlighted. That's what I would do as well. What you have to provide Google, in addition to that though, is you will have a website. And what I suggest is having a page dedicated to each location that you serve. So if you serve New York City, you would have a page that's New York City photography, and just post some of the pictures that you've done there, some of the clients maybe that you've had, reviews specifically where people are mentioning New York City, or they came from Google My Business and that person was from New York City, because Google can kind of put the pieces together and go, okay, this person's from New York City, so they obviously had their photos done in New York City. Because what we call that is locality. You want people, or you want to show Google, like, yes, I know that I serve a service area, but specifically this service area. And I would start with like your most profitable or like most important one first, and then go into, all right, so I do New York City, but I also do Long Island, but I also do, you can even get as granular as like towns or like, neighborhoods or what have you. It just depends on how big your service area is. But that's kind of the best way to show Google that, you do serve multiple areas and different locations. Yes, more web pages. I know. I'm sorry. Yeah. But it has to be done. It does.
Yes. And do you also think that maybe might help too, right? There's a lot of little tools within Google My Business I don't think enough people take advantage of. Like maybe George needs to just start doing posts, and those posts mentioning those specific areas. Like take that photo, or even you can even do what I think it's a 30-second video. Yep. So make it a slideshow with some photos you've taken in that area, and then kind of write that short article, and then have that link to book that appointment, because if people are searching, they'll find that post. And what I think 7 days, it's free. Mm-hmm. If you want to make it longer, make it an offer or make it an event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely one.
George, I just saw your question come through. Yes. Include those in your sitemap. Make sure you're doing that.
And so do you have any other strategies before we move on to the next question?
I guess since we just talked about locality, any time that you work with a local business, or like I said, Chamber of Commerce, make sure that those people are linking back to your website, because that helps prove to Google your locality as well.
Good point. And so we're going to take a second to run our sponsorship ad from StreamYard. So we'll be back in about 15 seconds. Here we go. And we're back.
Are we back?
I like the dancing music. It gives us that mid-show energy. So Tim, are you ready for question number 3?
Bring it on. So Brie, what are some red flags businesses should be aware of when looking for SEO help for their business?
Yeah, anytime somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to make you #1 on Google, pack your bags. George, pack your laptop. We're going to get out of there. We got to go. Because you don't control that. You cannot, there are no guarantees when it comes to working with Google. It's like, no. You can do your best. That's great. And especially if you're talking about really competitive keywords, because generally what that means is they're going to do some sort of quick fix, and then it'll last for like a day or two, maybe, if it works, and then Google's going to catch on, and then they're going to boot you. And what happens is they do this multiple times, right? So they'll say, oh, but that's okay, I know we dropped down to 5, and then they do another little quick fix thing, and then you go back up. But what happens is if you do that multiple times, Google will catch on, and eventually what they're going to do is they're going to de-index you, which means nobody can find you in search anymore. And that has literally put people out of business. So we don't want to do that. That's not good. Another big one is, I know this is controversial in the industry, but don't buy links. Like don't, because you want the links that are pointing to you to be legitimate, and you want them to add value. Like you want them to prove that you're a local business. You want them to prove that you're an authority in your space. You want them to prove that, you're doing, great things, or that you're an expert in your industry, right? You don't want it to be on some random website that, just had a good authority. So those are two of like my big ones. And another one is just like, this isn't really a red flag. This is just something like I truly believe in, like empowering my clients. Ask questions, ask them to explain exactly what it is that they're doing. And if they just pull a report and try and send you like a PDF, it's likely that they're just using some sort of service that's going to help them, with small things, and those small things can be helpful, but you really just want to make sure that who you're working with is legitimate and that they're going to be able to educate you. I truly believe that being educated is like your biggest weapon, because you can tell when somebody's being sketchy. SEO work is very tedious. So, a lot of times we are just making small changes, but being able to explain those changes, I think, is really important to the client as well.
Right. And we have a question in the comments too from David Wilson. What do you recommend for a new company starting out? WordPress, and I saw George also commented that for photographers, Squarespace is actually a really good platform. And so I think, even though I'm a WordPress fan, I realize there are other options out there.
Yeah, I think honestly, it truly 100%. And this is something that Brian Fanzo, shout out to Brian Fanzo, preaches a lot. It's not like what's the best channel, it's what's the best channel to make you successful. Like which one are you actually going to use, right? Because like I said, I have WordPress and I hate going in there and making changes, so I just don't. And I know as an SEO specifically, I know that that's not good for my business. But like one of these days I am just going to switch over to Squarespace because it's easier. It's easier for me. I understand it. It's intuitive. And I can do what I need to there. So just find one that you're comfortable with. A lot of these places have free trials. Squarespace will end up giving you like a 90-day free trial if you just keep like dragging your feet on it. But I would highly suggest just figuring out what works for you, if that's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Brie, how do you pick the correct keywords for your business? Like you were talking earlier about like, barbershop in Wichita or barbershop in, I'll say Dallas, Texas or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the name of our business, we forget, well, we're the only ones that know the name of our business. So how are they going to find me?
So first of all, a keyword is essentially, it's a query that you're trying to show up for. So people are coming to the search engine and they're typing in a query, a question, something that they're searching for, right? And so when we pick our keywords, we're trying to get into the brains of our customers. And that's really what I have to encourage people to do, because it is really easy to get stuck in like, okay, we call this an undercut. Like let's say we're barbers still, we call this an undercut, but is that how people are actually searching it? Do they know that it's called an undercut specifically? They may or they may not, right? So you really have to get into the minds of your customer. And those are going to be the things that are going to be the best target keywords, because, they're going to be making those searches. Now, on the other hand of that, let's say people look up, I always use this example of like cats, right? There are millions of searches for cats every month. And if you rank for that, cool, you're going to get a bunch of impressions and maybe even a bunch of traffic. But if you're selling cat food for cats with sensitive stomachs, Just getting traffic from the word cats is probably not going to be very qualified traffic. That's not traffic that's actually going to convert, right? Because if you look up cats, you could be looking for pictures of cats. You could be looking to adopt a cat. You could be looking for cat food. There are all these different ways that query could send people. So you kind of have to find like that in between. Like you do want something that's getting searched a lot, but also something that people are actually going to find what they need on your website, right? A couple free tools that I can just plug really quick. Keywords Everywhere is a Chrome extension. Love it. And that will show you related keywords. I think you have to pay like $5 for 10,000 credits or something. And then they'll show you like the keyword metrics for each of those keywords. So it'll show you this is how many times every month it's searched. This is how competitive the search or that keyword is. And then this is about how much on average you would have to pay to bid for this if you were doing like paid search ads, right? Mm-hmm. So really just start from the position of your customer. And then you also want to go through your site and make sure that you can find the answers for those keywords. Those are going to be the ones that are going to, if you can rank for them and you can rank highly for them, they're going to bring you the most value at the end of the day.
And here, this is an interesting question. When you do the research for keywords, does it help to reference hashtags on social media?
That would be a very interesting place to start, actually. Is to see where they're getting traffic. Now, I will say that just because people are looking it up that way on social media doesn't necessarily mean that that's how they're going to look it up on Google search. So when we talk about keyword research for social media, yes, that's absolutely a great place to start. But with YouTube or Google or any of those kind of entities, those huge search engines, I do suggest kind of starting, maybe you can take those, but I do suggest kind of just starting from the position of your audience and maybe how they would make those searches. A lot of times people are afraid to talk to their audience. I don't really know what that's about. Like you do business with these people, they should be, your friends. But I do suggest like talking to your audience. A lot of people have Facebook groups these days, and that's a great place to get consumer insight. Like, okay, how would you look this up? How did you get to our website? You can get some of that historical data once you start using SEO tools. But that's a really good place to start, is just start from the customer's point of view.
Right. And Stephen Kaplan, thank you so much for the kind comment. Tim and I definitely appreciate you. And Gabriel has a good question as well over from LinkedIn. How long does it take Google to start showing a new website?
Oh, this is so good. Everybody hates this answer. My answer is it depends. I'm a marketer. It depends. But no, truly, because like what happens if Michael Jordan was to make a new website tomorrow? A bunch of people would go to it, so Google would automatically index it, right? But if I started a new website tomorrow, Google might not find it for a minute because they find your websites through other people linking to you and all these other ways. But I will say, if you are starting, Gabriel, if you are starting a website, make sure that you create your website, then go to Search Engine Console, and then you can actually ask Google to crawl a page for you, and then they'll crawl your whole site and index it that way. That's the best way to do it, is to use Search Engine Console. But yeah, that's one of those things where it really just depends.
Right. Yeah. And I think, Linda, there's a setting you may have in LinkedIn that's not letting your picture show to us. So that's probably what happened there.
Yeah, it's probably a privacy setting
in your security settings. And I would have to agree with George on this one. Brie, are you on stage? Because you definitely know your stuff, and you've got a great presence, great voice. And if you're not, we're going to have to fix that. And
I appreciate it.
And Marissa, yes, we agree. She is so smart.
Marissa, that's my homegirl. I love her so much.
Yes, she is definitely awesome. So Tim, do you want to take the next question?
Absolutely. So Brie, what are some low cost or no cost tools that a business can start using to track their SEO results?
To track their SEO results. Search Engine Console is going to be your biggest, Search Console is going to be your biggest one. Make sure you set that up. That's through Google as well. So they're kind of, okay, so for both Google tools, so Search Console and then also Google Analytics. And those things will talk to one another. You can hook them up to one another. And then that's when you start getting really good data, and you can actually truly see the flow of where your searches are coming from, where people are coming from, whether or not they're clicking. And then once they get to your site, whether or not they're finding what they need to find, right? So those are like the two big ones you got to use right away. As far as tracking SEO results, I guess the other one I can think of, and I feel like I kind of have to disclose this off the bat, is I do contract work for Moz, but Moz does have they have a free tool called Check My Presence, where you can put in the name of your business and the zip code, and it will show you all of your citations. Remember we were talking about citations earlier? They'll show you all of your citations and whether or not there are any discrepancies across the internet for those big citations. So that's a really good one, because then, if you do the free report and you find that you have some discrepancies, you go fix them and then check it, like a week later and make sure that those discrepancies have been solved. Then you can kind of see your score on that go up. Other free tools. That's the thing about SEO, is that we're all tech nerds. So we use a lot of software as a service. A lot of them are paid. But for tracking results on like the other end of things, like there's a lot of free keyword, like I just said, like Keywords Everywhere, Answer the Public. If you use Answer the Public and Keywords Everywhere, you've got like the most brilliant keyword research combination there, because Answer the Public, what it does is you put in a keyword, it gives you all of these different questions that people ask about it and comparisons and all these things, and then you just hit that Keywords Everywhere extension and it shows you all of the search results for not the search results, the search volumes for all of them, the competition, cost per click, all of that stuff. So those are kind of like all of my favorite tools in one. I rely a lot on Google though for that information, just because they're Google. That's who I'm trying to please. So trying to use some other information.
Right. You're getting a lot of love from George, but George, I would have to agree with you. We definitely have to get Brie. We're going to now become your stage promoters to get you out there on stage, because you're definitely bringing some amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm just giving everyone virtual hugs right now. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
But yeah, and I actually love Keywords Everywhere and Answer the Public. I always love using it. I know they've changed the guy that's on the website for Answer the Public. I really like the other guy. He looked like a crazy old man. I wish they'd bring him back. But
fun fact, if you tweet out anything about the guy on Keywords Everywhere, he will tweet you back. Even if you don't tag him, if you just tag Keywords Everywhere. I don't know if he has like an alert set up, but yeah, he tweets at you.
Yes, that is so awesome. So Brie, I've put out here some places to follow you. You're obviously on Twitter. And after today, you will be on our Tim and Jim Show Twitter list. So we will be following all your tweets. And so make sure, if you're on Twitter, subscribe to our list. You can keep up with all our guests and their latest and greatest tweets. You're also on LinkedIn and got your website out there. Is there anywhere else that people might want to follow you?
Well, here's the fun thing about being in SEO. If you just Google Brie E. Anderson, I will show up. All of my stuff shows up. So, I mean, I don't really use Instagram a lot. I am on the TikTok train, so come follow me on TikTok. I'm having a lot of fun with it. And YouTube. I'm getting back on my YouTube game here. I drug my feet for a little bit, but I'm gonna start back at that. But this is the stuff that I love to do. I love talking to people and helping educate them and kind of empower them when it comes to their marketing analytics and search engine optimization. So please follow me, and I answer everything that comes through on all of these platforms. So yeah, I appreciate it a lot, actually.
Awesome. Tim, any final thoughts or questions for Brie? And I see if we have any more questions.
Yeah, no final questions for me. Just thank you so much for sharing all your valuable SEO knowledge with our amazing audience people here around the world. So we really appreciate you being here today.
Yes, and this has been great. I know you can never not learn something more about SEO because it's, just like everything else, it's always changing. And you brought up some great points. I know I need to actually go revisit Moz and check all my listings, because you're right. It's that, even going back to what you said about, you might have put ST instead of street on one thing, and it's just it does affect it. What are your thoughts concerning that? I know I've heard people in the past say that, like with some of these services, that what ends up happening is that if you pay for it, to get them to make all these corrections, and you stop paying for it, that it doesn't necessarily, your stuff doesn't stay the same way.
Right. So that's what happens. So that's kind of like the biggest benefit of using one of those services. So you have Moz, there's like White Spark, Bright Local, all of these different listing agencies. But the benefit there is that they lock your information, right? They lock all of your citations. So that's why a lot of people use them. Now, that was kind of the big danger that I was going to talk about not taking your Google My Business listing and getting it verified. Then anyone can come in and change that information, because all they have to do is make a suggestion. If you don't say in 14 days that suggestion is incorrect, then it automatically gets changed. Google automatically changes it to see if that's the truth. So that's like the big reason that a lot of people are using those listing services.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Brie, Tim. This has been great. This has been fun. We'll have to have you back again sometime, Brie, because I'm sure there's something we could dive into more. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. And next week, we're going to have Troy Sandage. And Troy is also an amazing human. It was great to have you, Brie. It's funny, right? We had this planned out before we knew all this was going to happen. So
yeah,
I'm glad it worked out. And great job in the home studio, as you called it today. But, it worked out great. And thanks, everyone. And we will see you next week on the Tim and Jim Show. Bye-bye.